Hello,
Hello.
I'm Brent Woolsey, in-house counsel for General Brands. Thank
Nice
you for
to
coming
meet
in.
you, Mr. Woolsey. I'm Joe Horton. I'm the Vice President for Marketing. I don't believe we've met before.
Do you happen to know Eric Berry? I believe he works in your department.
Yes, he does. He's worked for me for a couple of years now.
He and I actually went to MTSU together.
All right.
He's a good guy.
He is. We're lucky to have him here. He's really progressing very nicely.
Especially from the way he started. Before we start, would it be okay with you if I took notes during our meeting?
Sure, yes.
Okay, can you please tell me what brought you in here today?
Well, I mentioned in talking to you and getting some help with signing Pat Sullivan, you know, the Olympic star, just won the gold medal in figure skating. He'd like to get him signed to an endorsement contract with General Brands.
And how would you like to see this come out? Or more specifically, what would you like to accomplish and how may I help you in doing so?
Well, I need your help in determining the strategy for just conducting the negotiations and helping me come up with the terms, anything we need to have in there for sure. And I guess, I don't know if you've heard or not, but there have been just several rumors of some drug allegations with regard to Mr. Sullivan. And we need to address that somehow. I just need your help in dealing with these issues and trying to come up with a negotiation strategy.
So the situation, if I have it correctly, is that you would like to sign Pat Sullivan, who is an Olympic gold medal winning figure skater, to an endorsement contract with General Brands, but you're unsure of how to go about the negotiations and the stipulations we can include in the contract, and you're a little bit worried about how the alleged drug use would affect his, let's say, marketability.
Exactly.
And your main objective here is to establish a negotiation strategy and determine whether to make an offer and what offer to make.
That sounds right.
Excellent. Well, after I get a quick sense of the situation, it's my usual practice to discuss the issue of confidentiality with you. I understand that my assistant handed you a confidentiality sheet. Have you had a chance to review that?
Yes, she did, and I've gone over it.
All right, well, it's important to note that attorney-client privilege only attaches when we are discussing actual legal matters, so any discussion of business here may not always be covered. Also, it's important to understand that in the corporate situation, confidentiality is different. The corporation itself is my client, and therefore I owe my duty of confidentiality to the corporation solely, and not necessarily to you. Additionally, if there were to be any sort of conflict, I would be representing the corporation in that matter, and you would have to find other representation.
I understand all that.
Excellent. Having said all of that, I will be here throughout the negotiation process in any manner that I can be. The ultimate decision about whether to come to terms and what those terms will consist of will be left up to you, though.
Because I just need your opinion and a little bit of help in coming up with what that needs to be.
Excellent. Well, before I can fully assess the situation, I would like to get some more information from you. The way I have found most effective to do so is for the client to take me through the specifics of their case, usually in a chronological order. But your specific situation may not lend itself to a chronological narrative. So I would just like for you to provide me the best background that you can do. After that, I will ask you some general and then more specific questions. And finally, you can ask me any questions that you have, and we'll work together to explore various negotiating strategies and determine the best way to proceed. Do you have any questions before we start?
I don't think so.
Okay. Can you begin by telling me just about Mr. Sullivan and why you would like to hire him as an endorser for General Brands?
Of course, you know, the Olympics just ended about 3 weeks ago, and Mr. Sullivan won the gold medal for figure skating.
Right.
And of course, just as I was watching, I watched a lot of the Olympics and watched figure skating in particular, and you know, that's one of the most popular sports. And even me, and I'm not moved to tears very often, but I was just very moved by his performance. It practically moved me to tears, and I think most everyone watching had that same reaction.
The Olympics does hold a special place in the American imagination. What do you have in mind as far as utilizing Mr. Sullivan? Like, in what capacity would he be working for the company?
Well, I think my main interest would be having him be the spokesperson for WETOs.
And
You know, that's known as the Breakfast of Champions. You know, we've signed many former athletes and other athletes as spokespersons, and I think he's just in a perfect position right now to be a good representative.
because of his Olympic glory?
That's exactly right.
I see. And as a endorser for WETOs, what all would he be doing?
Well, of course, we would want to use his image for commercials and ads and even on the cereal boxes, that type of thing. And then I also would like to have him make some personal appearances at some high profile events. And I think we'll probably sponsor some events such as concerts or sports events or performances, you know, tournaments, that kind of thing, that we would need to like to have him appear, make personal appearances at.
Okay, and would he only be endorsing WETOs then, I guess?
Well, again, you know, given the drug rumors, I would really personally be very hesitant to sign him for anything else. I don't think he's particularly the spokesperson I want in general for some of our other products, but WETOs has just got that gritty, champion quality. It goes more for the champion, and he's the current worldwide known champion at this point from the Olympics, and just all the attention he's gotten from that.
So you think that potential character flaws will matter less as a spokesman for WETOs than for other General Brands products?
I think some of the other products I'm more concerned about a more wholesome figurehead. WETOs is, again, I think just more down in the just champion, grinded out, gritty type.
So it's more like star driven, more
Yes,
so than any
yes.
sort of squeaky clean image. Okay, now I know that you've mentioned the, I guess, potential or rumored drug use. Do you have any other concerns about signing Mr. Sullivan?
That's my main concern about him. Of course, I'm interested in trying to get him exclusively with General Brands, if at all possible. That's a big thing.
All right, well, let's talk on the drug issue first, if we could. I've heard a little bit, but could you please tell me like what you know, or I guess your specific concerns about his potential drug use?
I've done a little bit of checking, not a lot of in-depth at this point, but just trying to determine the validity of that. And what I've come up with is that rumors started surfacing a couple of years ago, just about some drug use, but they've never been confirmed.
So the rumors started 2 years ago. And when you say that they have never been confirmed, I mean, I assume that to mean that he's never actually failed a drug test.
Yes, there's no record of any failed test at all that
And
I've come across.
He's never admitted to using drugs.
Again, nothing that I've come across. He's always denied it, and there's never been anything confirming any kind of drug use on his part.
And you, I assume, have done a fair amount of background into this, or as much as can be expected.
I have.
Are the drugs that he allegedly used or may have used, are they performance enhancing drugs? You know, I guess traditionally steroids, but I think they have other things now, particularly for Olympians. Or are they like street drugs, like cocaine?
Well, of course, with the rumors, that's what they are, is rumors. And I've not really tracked down any specifics, but you would have to think that some of the rumors are with regard to street drugs, because they started swirling shortly before the Olympics. One of the exhibitions he performed very poorly at, and I think then he went to a benefit and he passed out at that benefit. So it's gotta make you think that there possibly could be some, not just the performance enhancing, but some street drug use also or potential for that.
But at this benefit, when he passed out, they, like medically, the doctors didn't attribute it to anything, or at least no medical records have been released to say that, so we just don't know.
We don't know that, but, you know, I've talked with persons there and with some persons kind of in his camp, and there's been no, again, confirmation and no positive drug tests at all that have come to light or that I'm aware of.
Well, let me ask you this, you mentioned people in his camp, have any of them come out and openly, and like, you know, put a name to the accusation other than just whispers and accuse him? Because if you remember Lance Armstrong, it was his, I don't know that he ever even failed a drug test, but it was his teammates who in books or in the media came out and said they'd seen him, and that was more than enough to end his, not necessarily his riding career,
Right.
but his career as an endorser and as a beloved celebrity.
That's something we might check out just in these negotiations once we officially make contact, is get some contact information for some of his team members and maybe talk with them just to make sure that nothing's forthcoming right before we start this big ad campaign.
Now let's talk about your goals here, or the company's goals, I guess. In these negotiations, what is important to you? What do you hope to achieve?
Well, I would love to sign him as exclusively as possible for general brands and to get as much service and time from him, you know, for a reasonable price. I am limited in budget. I don't have just an unlimited amount of money that I'm gonna be able to spend on this.
Okay, you said as exclusively as possible. Could you be more specific in that, I guess, or?
Well, you know, we'd like for him to be the face of Wheato, so at least as far as cereals go, there would have to be a provision that he could not represent or endorse any other cereals, and, you know, I'd like it as broad as possible, but I think that's my main interest.
So you wouldn't necessarily be against him having any other endorsements, just certainly no cereals, and maybe even no breakfast foods in general.
Right, yes.
Okay, do you know if he has any other endorsements currently?
Not that I'm aware of at this time. I've not heard of any, nothing's been made public. A couple other Olympians I know have already signed contracts, but I've not heard of any for Mr. Sullivan.
Okay, because you know, athletes tend to endorse, especially champion Olympians tend to endorse many products, but I would think that at least if we made him a solid offer, that we could at least be the sole breakfast food, especially if he doesn't currently have any endorsements.
I'm sure other people are talking to him, so probably the quicker the better, whether time is of the essence while the Olympics is still fresh on everybody's mind.
And you said have him as often as possible. What would the demands be as far as his time go?
Well, we could kind of front load the contract if we need to. You know, I'd like to get as many days of service a year that we could commit him to.
Would you want that particularly soon, sort of still in the glow of the Olympics? Sure. And then
Sure.
So you may be willing to use him less days in the future, potentially even overall, if you could get more.
Particularly right now, this first year, I think is the most important, and probably, you know, what I'm looking at ideally would be probably a 4-year contract. You know, this time, I don't know whether he actually will be in the next Olympics, but that would be kind of ideal to get us through to that. So the first year, and probably a little bit more than that last year, if in fact he's going to be participating at that time.
So in case he happens to be a star at the next Olympics,
Right.
he'd get access to that, because that could, and you said that you aren't sure of his chances or opportunity to make the next Olympic team.
Right. But to my way of thinking, even if he's not in the next Olympics, you know, all the ads build up to the Olympics, and just with him being an Olympic champion this year, he's gonna have some value even that year leading up to the next one.
Right. And are you wanting to put any sort of morality clause or anything, or behavior clause or stipulation?
I guess our PR department's gonna require something just with these drug issues. I don't know, maybe we could require him to submit to random drug tests. Maybe that might satisfy him.
That's an idea, and it's certainly something that if you would like to, we could ask for. In your experience of these endorsement contracts, do you know or have you placed any random drug test stipulations in contracts?
Well, I'm pretty new in this position. I've not actually done an endorsement contract up to this point. So I was just kind of thinking of some ideas.
Well,
I know we need to address the
Right.
drugs.
We do need to address the drugs. The reason I ask, and you may look into this more, I ask people who have, at the company who've been there longer, so I know they've done quite a few endorsement deals in the past. If my understanding is that they are athletes or drug tested, I bet it's the Olympics, the IOC, or their league, the NBA, or even their teams. But I don't believe that many, if any, are actually drug tested by the companies that they endorse. I don't know if that's an industry practice. But like I said, we can look into it, and if a morality clause honestly may be better anyway. It would give us more broad coverage. I mean, there are ways that he could get in trouble without specifically failing a drug test. If you remember, Michael Phelps was on video smoking weed, and that tanked his value. I mean, till recently, obviously, but for a while, no, he never actually failed a drug test. So we could write it in a way to make it broad coverage, include things if he failed the drug test for the IOC or for the American team or
That makes sense.
whatever it may be. And you said that you wanted it for a reasonable price. We may talk numbers. What do you have in mind as far as payment goes?
Well, like I said, I'm interested in a 4-year contract, and like to get him signed for around $1 million. Can't go much higher than that.
Is that $1 million for the 4 years, or $1 million per year?
$1 million for the 4 years.
So $250,000 a year.
Yes, and again, if we need to front load it, if they're interested in more money right now, maybe front load a little more to the beginning, but over the 4 years, I could go a little over $1 million, but not much. In fact, just between you and me, but just so you'll know kind of the absolute tops, like it goes 1.4. Absolutely couldn't go above that. But I'd like to get it closer to $1 million, because my budget over the next 5 years for everything, for the whole company and all of our products, is just $7 million. So WETOS is kind of a leader, but I can't devote much more of my budget to that. I'd love to have Pat Sullivan, but there are others out there we could sign if he's just gonna be demanding too much.
So that top end price is not negotiable then?
Right,
Okay.
yes.
I assume that you have had athletes on the WETOS box in the past. I mean, is this compensation in line with what former athletes have been?
Actually, prior to this, we've never signed anybody anywhere close to $1 million at this point. So if we even give them $1 million, that's gonna be more than we've signed anybody else to.
And how does this number compare, if you know, to industry norms, I guess? What do other people make?
Well, I've done a little bit of research just in general, because like I said, I've not been in this job too long, and of course the ultimate star of athlete endorsements is Mickey Jordan, of the former star of the Chicago Cows, and he makes 40 to 50 million in endorsement deals, but that's more than 15 companies.
Right.
And so, I mean, he makes a lot more money, but
What about, do you have any idea what other Olympians may make?
Again, I've been checking around, and a couple of, one just from this Olympics, with the same Winter Olympics, Lee Favory got the silver medal, behind Pat Sullivan. He's from France, and he signed a deal of 175,000 euros a year for 75 days of service a year. Of course, European contracts typically aren't as lucrative as the American, but that's just an idea there.
Okay, and yeah, something also to consider. I would say that American contracts, just because of the size of the market, are usually higher. And so I think that might be a useful comparison. I don't know that Mr. Jorpin is a useful comparison because, I mean, honestly, even though he won a gold medal in figure skating, he still doesn't approach the fame of a renowned basketball player. And they play 8 months a year after year, whereas, you know, the Olympics, it's 2 weeks a year, every 4 years. As I understand it, if I go through my notes real quick, you would like for Mr. Sullivan to be the primary spokesman for WeToes and only WeToes, to appear not only on the cereal box but in other promotional activities, as well as potentially sponsor events.
Right, and other advertisements, right, commercials, that kind of thing.
For 20 to 30 days a year. You think he's perfectly suited the position because of his recent Olympic glory, and his alleged drug use would have less of an effect on WeToes than other offers because it's more star driven than sort of,
right,
I guess, decency driven. Your primary concern as far as negotiations is the exclusivity, and to try to make that as broad as possible, with the realizing that if he gets other endorsements that are unrelated, that would probably be okay. And we don't necessarily want to go to 1.4 million over 4 years, but that would be the absolute highest that if we had to. And then we'll check and see, do you want to go or attempt to include the random drug testing provision, or would you rather just craft a morality clause?
I'll go with your opinion on that. I just know we need to address the drug issues. I know my PR people are gonna insist on that. So, first thing that popped into my head was the drug testing, but that.
Like I said, if you were determined, we can ask for it, but I think a morality clause is more typical in these situations. Do I have that about right?
Yes.
As far as what we're willing to move on from, potentially in the negotiations, the highest we can go is 1.4 million, period. Exclusivity, we're willing to go.
And I'd love to get it lower than that.
Right,
that's just saying.
Right, that's worst case scenario.
Right. I'd have to think about that, but, you know, I know I'd pay, I'd be willing to pay him $1 million, absolutely. But.
And it sounds to me, if I understand you correctly, like other than just a high cost, the exclusivity, and you know, the more exclusive the better is the most important thing too.
Right, and then just the nature of the services, the more we can get them committed to time-wise for that money.
Okay. Now, once we go through a round of negotiations, we may have to move from one of those though. You understand? We may, you know, to get a more exclusive deal, we may get in less days, so we'll have to decide where we're willing to give a little.
Of course, I'd like to start off offering lower and more days, and then we've got room to negotiate.
Well, it seems to me that now would be a good time to assess the strengths and weaknesses of our position. The weaknesses, as I see them, are that he is coming off the Olympic gold, and that makes him a pretty useful commodity for just about any brand right now. And I'm not sure that the offer that we're going to make to him would be the absolute most lucrative out there. What works in our favor is that, if we're being honest, compared to Jorpin, did you say? His fame isn't on the same level. He's an Olympic athlete, which is far less often. He's not even a summer Olympic athlete. In the United States, at least, the Summer Olympics are a far bigger draw than the Winter Olympics. Also, like his alleged drug use, or at least the rumors of such, I think may affect their barring position negatively, and maybe why he doesn't have any endorsements. They can even view this as sort of a rehabilitation of sorts to maybe do other endorsements once we show them.
Right.
And plus the front of a Wheatos box it's an iconic thing, and there's probably some appeal to that.
Hopefully that's gonna be very tempting to
Right.
him.
Having said all of that, the way this will work is that we'll need to make an initial offer, and then once we do that, we'll have a better idea about their positions and the next step once we get a response. What do you think, or what would you like to make as an initial offer?
Well, in my opinion, as far as starting out, let's just ask for all we can ask for, lowball the money, maybe even start off at $750,000 to $800,000. Say 800,000, 200,000 a year
Okay,
for the 4 years,
that doesn't seem unreasonable to me, honestly.
and at least 50 to 60 days a year, close to a couple of months, a year commitment, and then see where they come back.
Okay, and then we want to include the morality clause.
And of course, something there, yes. You're the expert there, we just need to address that, so that makes sense for the morality clause, I think that's fine.
Okay, well, I will I will actually send you a copy of the morality clause that I draft before I send this contract to them, and let you look it over and see if there's anything else you would like to include. From what I gather, time is of the essence to you while he's basking in the After Olympics glow,
Yes.
so we'll need to do
I'd
this.
like to make first contact and get that going
Okay.
by the first of next week anyway.
Do you know if he has representation?
He does, he has hired an entertainment attorney, I've
Okay.
got that information in my office.
Okay, well, I will draft this morality clause and send that to you. Once I receive that back from you or get the okay, I will contact his attorney, send over the contract offer. If you could send me his attorney's information, and get the data on the compensation that we had spoken of. And if at all possible, give me a full list of what former Wheatos endorsers have been paid.
All right, I can do that.
And once I've contacted him and set up negotiations, I will let you know, and we'll set up a time to meet beforehand and go over everything one more time. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call.
Sounds great.
All right, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, good meeting you, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.